So yeah, my name is Ingrid and I'm Sam's sister. So my brother Sam is 18 and I'm a few years older than him. And today we want to talk about basically my sort of typical experience getting a job while I was still in school, and then my story sort of since then, and then comparing it to sort of our expectations and aspirations for my brother. So if I can have this experience, why can't Sammy have the same kind of typical experience? So Sammy's lots of things. He's my brother, he's my parents' son, he's a year 12 graduate, he finished school at the end of last year. He currently works 2 mornings a week at a sports centre in sort of 2 different roles, and throughout the course of his school he also did a range of work experience and volunteer positions. Sam also has a whole wide range of interests, including dancing, music, gardening, travelling. He enjoys movies, theatre, particularly musicals. He very much enjoyed Mamma Mia. Also swimming, walking, and he also whiles away a few hours on YouTube learning all kinds of things that are interesting. So yeah, as I said, we sort of expected a very typical pathway for Sammy. We looked at the sort of things that were available to him through sort of targeted disability employment and that kind of thing, and they didn't really align with the kind of aspirations that we had for his life. So I want to take a moment just to talk about my sort of very typical pathway through school, through a high school and a college in Canberra, my path into university. So while I was at school, from about the age of sort of 13 or so, I was encouraged to have a job, to learn how to write a resume, to undertake work experience, to undertake volunteering opportunities. So I got my first job when I was 15. I found it in a local newspaper. I emailed them. I got a job. I worked 5 hours on a Saturday. I don't really remember why I wanted a job. I think it was mostly just because a lot of my peers were doing the same thing. I was looking around me. My friends were working at the local IGA. And so when Sammy got to the same age, it was kind of like, well, why can't he have that same kind of experience? And yeah, we were actively taught how to write a resume and how to kind of market ourselves for these jobs. And then sort of since finishing school, I've had a whole variety of different retail and hospitality jobs, and they've all kind of been linked together, and I've, mostly enjoyed them, and that's a very sort of average way to move through school and into the workplace. It's just a couple of photos of me at 15 and at 20 and a couple of my different jobs. Yeah, you remember those jobs, don't you, Sammy? Yeah. Oh, thanks, Sammy. So Sam's experience has largely been pretty different, at least in sort of what was offered from the school and what was expected of him. So he has undertaken a whole bunch of work experience and volunteer roles, but these were largely off the initiative of my parents and sort of outside advocacy. So during the course of his school, he did some work experience at a charity retail centre, a recycling centre, a recording studio, some horticulture work, and also a large retail store. So there's him at the door greeting all the customers and handing out catalogues. And then last year was the real sort of milestone for Sam, and that's when he gained some paid employment at a sports centre in Canberra. So this job Dad will talk about a little bit more, but basically it was found through a connection of a friend, and we carved out a role for Sammy in that place. And as he's been there longer, so after a few months, this led to a second role for him. And every week when he goes back, he's learning different tasks to do and expanding his job there.
Not now, Anne.
Yeah, you had work this morning, didn't you?
Not now.
So where to now? Sammy finished school last year. I mean, for my experience, I left school, I went straight into university. We looked at the options for Sammy when he finished school and considered really what was the best thing for him and what he wanted and what we sort of desired from his next steps. So we looked at things like more work experience, which can be great and can give more experience, but it's typically not paid employment and can be repetitive and isn't always sort of giving this good, rich enjoyment of life that you might get from a paid and valued role. Also something like so just applying for open jobs, but this can also have its setbacks. You know, if you're just handing in resumes to advertise positions, it's easy to get knocked back for not having the right skills or being the right person. And then the option of further education, which is still desirable for us, but is rather limited in what's available. So the answer for us over the past few years, few months since Sammy finished school, has been to carry out this process of job discovery and customised employment. So carving out a role for Sammy in a workplace and really filling up his week with this kind of employment. So I'm going to pass over to Dad, who's going to talk in a bit more detail about what we've done to get Sammy into paid employment and also what we're still continuously doing in this discovery process.
Great, thanks, Ingrid. That was really clear and well organised. We're kind of new to this in a sense. Even though we've been doing it for 2 years, we do see it as an ongoing process of finding employment for Sam over a lifetime, really, and it is very early days. We can't speak with any great expertise. We've been trying to put together it as we go, and we're still working on it every couple of weeks, every month or so. We have some sort of approach to it. So, where we were at, what we were seeking was an approach to Sam's employment where he would not face the usual barriers. And that's, we found through schooling, particularly a perception that he was defined by what he couldn't do, by his competencies, as they call it, at sort of TAFE. Yeah? But they want to know where you fail, if you like. And who of us has ever been to a job interview and admitted our failings? It's the last thing you do, yeah? You spend your time hiding them. It's their job to tease them out of you. Yet somehow it goes the other way with people like Sam, perhaps. So we had that sense that, without going on about all those issues, so our intuition told us that it wasn't worthwhile jumping the usual hurdles, going up the sort of barriers we met through schooling and in the general wider community, which there's no point harping on about them. They'll always be there, or they'll often be there. So partly through our contact with groups like Imagine More, and in my case Imagine Better over in New Zealand a couple of years ago where I spoke. That's where I met John Armstrong and kind of got inspired by this way of thinking. Yeah, I sort of joke that I drank the Kool-Aid, and since then I've been part of that kind of thing. Yeah, and it really, as someone said, I think it was Jackie, about a sort of gut feeling. It was my gut feeling about this approach to life too that worked. And along the way, the last year or two, we've discovered the work of Mark Gold Associates. That's Mark with a C. If you want to Google him, I put it with a K there. So Mark Gold Associates. They've been around about 40 odd years. We were lucky enough to have, through Imagine More, a Mike Callahan, I think his name was, speaking the last year or so here and at various other venues in Australia. And he expanded our notion of what it meant to find a job for people with significant issues, challenges, disabilities. So I'm in no position to, outline all that. Mike took a whole day at the National Museum. I saw him speak in Melbourne for another couple of hours. These workshops can go on and on. So the aim here is just to sketch what we've been doing, what we've been able to garner from these other experts, if you like. So their services are long established, over 40 years. They're quite professional. They sort of contract out the sort of work that we do as a kind of a family team or family and community team. So we've needed to cobble together our network using people from Imagine More, friends, advocates that we know. And some paid support workers have been important to that too. We self-manage Sam's NDIS package, and we have employed his support workers to come along to our meetings and give feedback on Sammy's observations, as we'll get to in a minute, what Sammy does well. So the process has been going on for about 2 years. As I said, it relies on those things. I started out, I look around the room and I see some of the people we started with. Karen here, Michelle was here somewhere, she may have gone. I saw her face somewhere. there she is. Jan, we all know. Adrian is around the conference somewhere. I think that's it. Jan, Michelle, Karen and Adrian were the ones I was sitting in a room with 2 years ago, just talking about how to get employment going. Since then, we've, with the help of some of this funding from Jan and that, we've been facilitating a more formal group of kind of a circle of support of people, support workers and family, particularly Ingrid, has made a great contribution to formalising it over the last 6 months. So what have we been doing with all these meetings? I'm supposed to hit a button, aren't I? I've been teaching for 30 years, I'm about to retire and I've lost the knack. That one there? And I'm much more nervous in this type of environment than I am teaching to hundreds of students. Far less confident perhaps about what I'm talking about. So what this discovery process, these are just labels. I'm no expert on what discovery is or what job carving is or what customised employment is, but I'll try to give you a taste of it if you haven't come across the ideas before. So it's sort of a qualitative research process. I'm an economist, so we talk about quantitative research. We look at numbers, you count people, count the unemployed, and then you've got qualitative research where you just look at things, you ask people to report, you just do observations basically, and gather the observations and code them. So it's very much like this, but not so highfalutin. I think of it as walking into the room with a blank sheet of paper and looking at what's going on. And I learned a lot of this from my wife Anne, who we haven't introduced, who's at the back of the room now with Sam. Anne had a career before teaching more formally. She had a career in early childhood in the UK. And when I met Jan, she spoke, Jan, I'd confused that. I don't think I've ever known her. Anne introduced me to this idea of observation, just careful observation of small children, 2, 3, 4-year-olds, yeah? And recording them. You know, Sally hit Bob 4 times this week, and that's fewer than 6 times last week. Then they would confer as teachers, or yes, that's an improvement for Sal. She's only hit Bob 4 times, not 6, yeah? And etc. Yeah? Careful, detailed, matter of fact. Not elaborate, not theorised why Sally hit Bob, just observations. Yeah? Or whether Bob was a bad boy or not and deserved a good whack, I don't know. We don't care, just observations. A blank sheet and the facts. Okay, so what we do, that's what we do. It's a careful and extended focus on Sam's interests, attributes and skills, all positive. Not looking at what he can't do, what I can't do, yeah? I could enumerate that all day, what I can't do, but I'm not going to tell you.
Not now, Bobby.
I'm certainly not going to tell my... you know what I can't do. If I ever apply for another job after I retire in a few months, I'm sure as hell not going to enumerate all my failings over the last 30 years. I'm going to tell them, you know, all the good stuff I might have done, or yeah. So start with that attitude, yeah. So we focus on his interests, attributes, and skills. You might say, well, how do you do that? Well, we take these detailed observations, the sort of observations I was talking about that my wife Anne did in preschool children years ago, and is still doing now in her current career. And it's taught me a lot about teaching too, not to prejudge the students who come into my rooms, some of whom mightn't be so strong, others I think are extrovert and really clever. You just sit back and wait and watch, yeah?
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, exactly. You might find you've got a surprise, Sam, yeah? So it's detailed observations, and with Sam undertaking the task that he enjoys and is familiar with. So there's no point just looking at any random things that are happening in the day. Look for things he likes to do, and we take notes on things like shopping, gardening, at his music lesson that he's been doing for some years, and at work for the last couple of years. And, as I say, with the blank sheet of paper, we take notes. We've used film using their phones to film Sam in situations with a support worker or not, or with his workmates at his sports centre or not. and in a whole range of environments. And then later on we'll upload these. We've got a BitClever and we've got a Google Drive site, sort of a place to dump all this information, so we can all access this website, this quasi website, and we'll watch the videos. We'll play them on our phones in our little room not far from here, at a hall, often organised by Jan and her group, and we'll sit and talk about it. What are you seeing? What are you seeing? Yeah, and we'll take more notes, and we build up a litany of kind of long list of observations of different people. I'm the oldest in the room. There are people there that are 20. Some are support workers. Ingrid, his sister. Some have worked with him, some have shopped with him, some have known him a long time, some a short time. So we found that very useful. Not perfect, but extremely useful. So we take notes, we look at the recordings, and from these lists of observations that we create over an extended period of time, we gain a sense of Sam's skills and insights to the way he adapts to tasks, which is something I as a parent hadn't really seen that much, I must say. And we see the areas where he may need support and where tasks might need to be modified or changed a bit to facilitate Sam to achieve the goals that he wants at the workplace. So these are still just notes, if you like, yeah? Notes leading to skills or attributes, things he likes to do. And these observations assist our creative thinking, we hope they're creative, about potential areas that Sam can contribute in a range of work environments. And sitting back a bit, we also try to stretch him beyond areas that he is familiar with and explore areas beyond his immediate interests, maintaining an open mind about the types of roles and potential he might have. So rather than starting with jobs or a career, like I want to be a doctor or I want to be a tree surgeon, it's looking at the things that the person likes to do, how they do it, where they're showing strengths at it, and then saying, well, how do we kind of channel those skills into a role, as John was talking about earlier, a socially valued role that also has a value to the employer, which I'll get to in a while, a productive role. So he's worth the money they're paying him. And right from the beginning, we had a strong focus on paid employment too, partly prompted by my friend Jan, saying get in there as quick as you can. Not for the money per se, but because of that notion of being valued, I think. Yeah. So, what we've discovered, yeah? That's yours. Thank you. Yep.
So yeah, from these kind of meetings that we've had and this big massive observations that we've created, I mean, some of them are very basic. Some of the situations we filmed Sammy in are really just like putting a trolley load of shopping on the conveyor belt at the supermarket, taking things off the shelf, when he's at work, just little tasks that he's doing. It might be sweeping, it might be vacuuming, it might be doing horticulture here. So really, sometimes they're only sort of 20, 30-second clips, but really honing in on exactly what he's doing in that situation. And so these are some of the sort of main points that we've drawn out from multiple videos that we've watched of him, and then we've kind of collated them together to come up with this set of skills. So for Sam, obviously very specifically, it would vary person by person, but his include things like selecting, sequencing, sorting. He's good at packing and stacking. He has a very good eye for seeing where things go and putting things together. He's extremely diligent with tidying up and ordering things. He likes things to be clean. Generally likes things to be clean and in order, and will often sort of rush to pack something up. He very much enjoys, particularly with garden waste, loading and unloading, so having a ute, loading it up, going to the green tip, unloading it, gets real buzz out of that. He shows a lot of perseverance in these tasks, like he really wants to finish them off often, and he takes a lot of pride in his work and in his job. And he also engages very well with other co-workers and with his supervisors. He respects them, they respect him. There's a real sort of mutual relationship there. And also just his sort of general problem-solving skills we've identified in lots of these videos. He'll encounter a problem and we sort of have identified the ways that he resolves them. So whilst they may not be the most traditional skills or the ways that you'd think about it. I mean, it's not the way I'd think about my skills for an employer, for instance, but it's the way that we're approaching how we can sort of carve out a role. And I think one of the main things to take away here is the pride Sammy really feels in his job. I mean, he loves wearing high vis, for instance. He loves having a uniform. He loves like telling people he's been at work, that he's going to get his pay. And so that really shines through, even if you sort of disregard everything else that he's able to do. He's so proud of that. So this is sort of really important when we sort of go to an employer and we can show this set of skills that he's got and what Sammy can offer the business, what the business can offer him. And so Dad's going to talk a bit about sort of job carving and customising employment for the person.
I talked a little bit earlier about the job discovery, which focuses on the individual and their skills, building up a profile of their capacities, that's something they've got to offer the employee. So we've got a profile now, and this could take weeks or hours of observation. The Mark Gold Tufts talks about 20 hours of professional observation, but we've stretched that a bit, I think, because as I say, we cobble it together as we go. Weeks of good work, but maybe not as, not quite as structured as they do it. So over some time, you've got a profile, as Ingrid has just outlined here. That's a nice one. And that previous list she mentioned, I say as a parent, I was probably only aware of half of those 6 months ago. So it was really useful for me to get over my blind spot or prejudices or whatever as a dad and see that there were other very highly valued skills there in my son that I maybe had overlooked or was just too hadn't seen, yeah? So that was really useful for me, particularly when I've currently been the person doing some of the approaches, which I'll come to later. So we've got a profile, you've got your kind of picture of the person, what sort of job, the job question's always there. But even then we don't dive straight in to looking at advertised jobs. John mentioned, I think, the Employable Me that I've been catching up on with iView the other day, the last couple of days. I've only watched the first two. But, going off and applying for advertised jobs against a job description is very challenging for all of us. We all normally have to fudge or fail some of those things, particularly at an age when expectations are so high, yeah? 12 points, you've got to be a genius just to get through the door, So when you've got other challenges, you're virtually on a hiding to nothing. You're probably not going to make the short list, whatever. So for those sorts of reasons, we eschewed, we moved away from looking for jobs in the typical way that Ingrid had approached it, applying for it. We've sort of got to move around a bit, work around the problem somehow, yeah? As with your schooling issue, work around it rather than confront it head on. So, job carving was the term used by Mark Gold and Associates and other people who know more about it than me, and then it became this kind of a development of that is customised employment. So as you can guess, it's about kind of slicing out roles for the individual that will suit them and creating a new job description, a new role, a new made up of roles, a new thing that they are. So job carving aims to fashion a job for the individual by looking at a workplace with existing job descriptions, the formal ones I mentioned, but then select tasks that match the individual's skills and interests, thus creating a specific role or job. So that's something of what I tried to do when I approached the sports area that Sam's currently working in. It wasn't that structured, but it was sort of talking to the managers and saying, well, what sort of things do you do here? What might suit him, That kind of very general discussion, not so structured, rather than saying, is he going to be a front of house or a ticket seller or a cleaner or a sports ball manager or something, whatever other labels they had. We didn't talk in labels, we talked in terms of tasks that might suit Sam. That was what we did informally. Whereas what we're moving into in our current process the last few months has been, and having seen Mike from the United States 6 months ago or so, is this notion of customised employment. It's kind of similar, and perhaps an extension of the idea of job carving. But I think it's a bit more ambitious, and it addresses the problem sort of full on. You're kind of breaking down the labour process. You're breaking down everything in the factory, if you like, or everything on the shop floor, and saying, a bit like what Ingrid was saying about observing what Sam does, you go in and observe what the workplace does. In her bookshop, who stacks the books, who wraps them, who takes the empty cardboard boxes down to the disposal bin, you know? And in that sort of case, I'd say to her, well, with her skills on the floor in retail, they're wasting her time paying her, well, a princely sum of $22 an hour or something to carry cardboard boxes down to the waste bin and waste 20 minutes or so in the lift, yeah? So you look at those tasks that could be done by somebody else, whether it be the retail side of it or the packing the boxes, yeah? And you slice out bits and pieces, yeah? And you cobble together. So that's how I see customised employment working, and it obviously varies for the individuals and their different range of skills and issues that they confront. So it's unbundling the current jobs, breaking down the tasks, the roles, the functions in the workplace so that a position is created. And we found that using a query for employers, what should get done that doesn't get done in your workplace. The other thing that, no matter how efficient managers always say they are, they all know there's things that are left undone, you know? My office at work's always a mess. Everything's filed in archaeological order, you know? If I'd been able to pay an assistant for the last 10 years, and I've told my head of school this for years, $5,000 to employ someone to help me with my filing, I would have been a much more efficient worker. But instead I'm swimming under paper and looking through emails, you know? The thing I do better is talking to students about their projects or something, you know. I hate filing, unlike Sam, I hate organising. Perhaps he should come and organise my room. But that sort of common sense stuff, really, you know, that adds to productivity. It's product innovation, really. It's workplace innovation. I used to work with a guy at Manchester University in the UK who was famous for technological change, and his simple way of talking about technological change was ways of doing things. It's not the machinery, it's how we use it, yeah?
No.
Exactly. How you use the wheelbarrow, how you use the computer. That's tech change, not the actual physical artefact, yeah? So in a way, all this appeals to my other interests in that, and Ingrid will take over, or she'll tell me I'm talking far too much.
So I'll just talk briefly about another part of the discovery process, which is the conditions for success that we've identified through making these observations. So they're all, I won't enumerate each of them here, but there's sort of general things about the environment that anybody works in that they enjoy. And so we've made an effort to identify these for Sammy, so when we are looking at carving out a job, we can really focus on where he can really thrive and where he'll enjoy working. And so some of these for Sammy, he likes working inside, he likes working outside, he very much likes to be around other people, like a job where he's just by himself wouldn't suit him. He's very extroverted, very social. He really enjoys sort of banter with his colleagues, with his workmates. And there's a couple of other things. I mean, like temperature outside, he'd rather it be a little bit cooler than too hot. He needs some clear instruction and a bit of time to process information. And we're generally we're building this up at the moment, but he's generally starting with sort of a 2 to 3 hour kind of shift. So it's being flexible about how long he can work and sort of how long he can focus on tasks. But this is all sort of things we're working on. But it's nice to be aware of the kind of conditions that help Sammy to really thrive in a job. So do you want to?
Are we up to the workshop?
Yeah.
I printed off 50 of those, I believe, so we may not have enough. If not, can you just sit with someone who has one or pass along a copy and share them? So everyone can have a quick look. Hopefully we've got about 5 or 10 minutes to do this, maybe 8 minutes. 8 minutes? We've got 15 to do it, and we've got a couple more slides to read.
Yeah, we've got a couple more things, so.
But yeah, well, let's aim for 10 and see how we go. And the chair might stop us. But it'd be nice to have half an hour for a workshop, but we thought, well, make it a bit interactive in the modern teaching way. And get you thinking about your own issues. You've had a glimpse of the issues we faced and how we've tried to address them with Sam. And through a bit of luck and that, he's on a path through. So think about your own person or yourself, or if you're a agency person or a worker, think about someone you know, yeah? And just, I thought the first 2 or 3 questions, have we finished with conditions for success?
No, the lady just wanted to. She just wanted to see that. It's fine. Done.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
The lady just wanted to see that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, if everyone just wants to take a moment, have a look at the worksheet. It's basically just talking about the person's interests, what kind of things they like to do. Just have a sort of quick brainstorm. It can be with anybody sitting around you. But yeah, and just try and think about their interests and some of their skills. And then maybe we can talk about how we sort of link these to potential roles in workplaces. We've just got a brief example up in the slide, just in italics there as well, which is just an example of sort of transferring skills from somebody's interest and someone's sort of ability. So if you just need a bit of a trigger for your thoughts. So I hate to interrupt while everyone's having great discussions, but since we are a little low on time, we'd love to expand this into a whole big workshop, but feel free if anyone wants to come up to me or Dad. We'll be around for most of the rest of the day, so over lunch and that, feel free to come and discuss any of your thoughts and any of the kind of things that you've been jotting down in the past few minutes. I just want to move on now just to how we've used, so this is, sorry, not the most clear image, but basically this is Sammy's resume. It's currently in a bit of a draft form. We've only just kind of created it. But it's essentially, it's based on my own. We didn't want it to be like a super, special resume or something. It's just meant to be one that we can take to employers that shows who Sammy is. But obviously there's a few kind of modifications we've made compared to the kind of resume that I'd produce. So we've got your typical stuff at the bottom, at the top, his availability, his date of birth, etc. But then we start with his strengths. So while you might typically start with sort of education and those kind of bland things, we really kick it off with Sammy's strengths. So that's just kind of a reduction of those skills that we were talking about before. And then of course we have his employment, his relevant experience. This is quite a condensed version, but obviously you could always enumerate that experience a bit, but the real focus is having his strengths on there. And then just down the bottom we've got the typical stuff of his education and some referees. So they typically be often a character reference, and then he'd have a work reference on there as well. And the other thing that's kind of a bit notable about his resume is that we do have some pictures there, but we think these are quite important because they do demonstrate Sammy in the role. They give a kind of active sense to what he's doing. I mean, I kind of see it, if I was applying for a job now as a graduate or an academic job, I'd be attaching my academic transcript as kind of evidence of what I've done. And in a way, that's what Sammy's photos are here. They're not trying to be babyish or anything like that. They're just demonstrating his work and what he does, and gives people a sense of the kind of worker that he is. So we're not using this to apply for sort of open jobs, but it's kind of the calling card we'd be using if we're talking to employers, the sort of impression that we're leaving with them, just giving them this sort of page of Sammy's achievements. So yeah, Dad's going to briefly just talk about how we approach employers and how we've been doing that.
Thanks. Yeah, on that last point, before I had this resume and I talked to an employer about Sam's current job, I just took along some pictures I had in a folder, along with a brief conventional curriculum vitae, everything. The thing they were impressed by were the pictures, half or full page pictures of Sammy actively lifting leaves and tipping them into the green waste. And the bloke I was talking to was a manager in the sports field area. He wasn't an office person. He said, looks like he likes to...
Yeah.
Elliot, yeah. He said, yeah, he likes to get stuck in, doesn't he? I thought that hit the button, an active voice. Don't you like to get stuck in, yeah? You nag me to go over to the green waste every other day. These pictures do work. They're not... So, approaching employers, So again, we stress his strengths and his weaknesses, barely mention any other issues. That fits within a support framework, I think. It's fairly obvious when you meet Sammy. I take Sammy with me, or we go together, I support him. you know, you don't have to have a big sign above your head to work it out, yeah? If not, you shouldn't be there. That's not the employer that we want. And they often have a pre-warning through a friend of a friend, which I'll get to. So what customised employment involves, as I mentioned, perhaps alluded to earlier, it involves very direct and intimate and personal interaction with the employers within each potential workplace. So you steel yourself for rejection, but as I found with this job, happily surprised when people are so open-hearted, open-minded and accepting, yeah? Terrific feeling. I tell you, it was the most nerve-wracking thing I've done. Any job interview I've done myself, and I've done several in half a dozen institutions here and there, asking for that was much harder. But now I've done it once, I feel well, I can kick it along. When I look at the Mark Gold Associates website, they say they have young professional people who ring employees and try to queue up introductions, and they have a success rate of about 1 in 6, they say. That's not too bad. If you get 1 every hour, 1 every 2 hours, that's not bad, is it? You know, you've done that sort of work. So it's not bad to get 1 in 5, 1 in 6, yeah? So you do, that's probably gets your foot in the door for a chat, yeah? But it's that personalised approach, I think, and having Sam along, not doing it anonymously through an employment agency is, I find, and certainly not I've got anything against HR functions, but talking to the people who actually organise the shop floor is more useful than talking to personnel or other people. So the range of ways we've done it, which isn't quite to the textbook, is just being opportunistic, the way Jackie mentioned. Someone in a restaurant mentions a job, you grab it, you talk to them, you hold them by the ears until they give you an offer, or you come back the next week, yeah? Opportunistic, there's a guy where I buy my wine, he's now changed wine shops, and I'm keeping an eye on this guy, John, every wine shop he goes to, because I'm going to ask him soon, you know, about Sammy stacking and packing. He's now 18, so I can talk to John about that rather than talk to him about wines. And using connections, the job Sam got was a friend of a friend, basically. A former student of mine knew the wife of the guy who was the manager. Coincidentally, this guy in his second marriage happens to also have a son who probably has some issues, which I don't know about. But so all the right things were in place, yeah? So a friend of a friend of a friend, basically, asked a phone call, an email, and they went around the circle of Canberra until I went over. I'd met the guy once in another environment, and he looked like a good bloke, you know. And then he, of course, passed me on to his colleague, who is equally a manager in the same large complex, and she was very warm and accepting too. And Sam had got a bit of a reputation around the campus by that time. They got to know him as hanging out in the coffee shop. He's seen around, don't you, Sam? You say goodbye to everyone at the coffee shop every time you go there. So he's kind of known there after 12 months, only being in there 1 or 2 days a week. So that's terrific. And approaching prospective employees that Sam might have an interest in. That's the more formal structure. So through looking at his interest, we'll be mapping out areas that he might want to work in. We tried one of the big retail places down near the airport. That didn't work out, even with a connection, even though we thought it was a good fit. But we might have another shot next year at them. And we explore the employer's needs. So this is ideally, you get your foot in the door, you have a look around, you talk to the employer. What are their needs? As I said, carving the role, negotiating the job, and all the supports that Sammy might need, whether they're formal supports from as self-managed fund. Increasingly over time, we hope it's the people on the shop floor who'll support him, which Ingrid observed when she supported Sammy a week or 2 ago when we had a guy sick, a support worker sick. She brought back some video of one of the guys Sam had worked with a little bit. They got on famously. And this young bloke, even though he had no particularly training in this area, was just getting on really well with him. So that gives me inspiration that you can have sort of workers on the shop floor supporting each other the same way colleagues do in all environments. Yeah? Except academics are always trying to strangle each other, you know. Again, we mentioned the jobs that aren't done, and the overall aim is to look for valuable and valued work for Sam that not only he values, but the employer values too.
Yeah, so I'll just briefly wrap up. But basically, we just want to touch on the things that Sammy loves about being employed. He has a very clear idea of what employment means, which I think sort of surprised us in some ways, like how much he's really thrived on being out of school. Yeah, he understands his pay. If he sees workers, like we were at Belconnen Mall the other day and we saw some blokes doing some gardening, and Sammy was so excited. Like they had their high vis on and we went over and had a chat to them and they were like, oh yeah, we'd love you to work with us and all this kind of thing. And just having those conversations just when we're out and about, he gets very excited. And he just loves having a uniform, having an access pass. He signs his timesheet. His supervisor's great with all that kind of thing. And that's the real buzz that Sammy gets out of it and how we want him to continue living his life.